Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the recent session of the 39th Annual Cornell Real Estate Council Conference. Today's topic will be, excuse me, I'm sorry. Today's conference will be on accelerating digitization and innovation of the built world. My name is Steve Carvel. I am the director of the Center for Real Estate and Finance at Cornell University and a professor of finance. The Center for Real Estate and Finance is the outreach organization of real estate at Cornell. We have 60 phenomenal members. And of course, I would invite you all to take a look at our website when you have a chance. Today's session is going to be run by Brad Greeley. I want to thank Brad. He'll be moderating a phenomenal panel. I also want to thank our official sponsors of the event, Goodwin Procter, Hudson's Bay Company, and Paul Rabaka. I also want to take an opportunity to thank the entire steering committee, particularly calling out our co-chairs, Alan Rifkin, Jen Davis, and Lahi Young. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Brad and have him introduce the panel and get us started. Take it away, Brad.
Thank you. Honored to be here. I appreciate everyone's attendance and looking forward to what I believe to be one of the best collection of panelists I've moderated to date. Really excited to introduce these three esteemed members who are, when you talk about accelerating digitization in the built world, I can't think of three better individuals who are doing that and living it every day. We'll get into the details, but let's start with just brief introductions. On today's panel, we have Lucas, founder and CEO of SmartRent. We have Ari, the founder and CEO of WiredScore, and last but not least, Kevin, the CEO of North America at Willow. I think obviously, creating a baseline for this conversation and starting with sort of a general introduction and overview of your business, I think is where I'd like to start. I'm sure we'll, dive into the nuances of the specifics of your business as part of answering some of the questions we'll discuss. So let's just do a really quick, brief overview of what companies you guys are focused on building today. Lucas, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thanks, Brad, and thanks everyone for joining. Great to be with you. So yeah, at SmartRent, we build enterprise IoT software, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's actually pretty simple. It's the idea of taking a lot of connected devices and bringing them all into one platform. The problem we really discovered as real estate operators, my background is actually in operating real estate, is that all these smart devices, Nest thermostats and smart locks and leak sensors, they're all designed for one person to put in one home. And no one had thought about how do we control hundreds of thousands of these or millions of these. And so that's what we do. We bring that enterprise layer of control to smart devices.
Great. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and I don't think there's anything more on the nose in terms of digitizing the built world. So really appreciate your participation today, Lucas. Ari, let's move on to you. Can you give us a brief overview of WiredScore?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brad, and thanks for having me, Cornell team. Excited to be a part of this community for an hour and stay in touch after this. So I founded a company called WiredScore. And what WiredScore is it's a certification platform for connectivity and smart technology in buildings. So our customers are developers and landlords, and we work with them to assess the digital connectivity and smart tech in their buildings. We work with both office and, as of a few months ago, multifamily, so apartment buildings. We give recommendations and data back to the landlords to help them improve the technology of their buildings. And then, as certifications do, we help the buildings that meet our standard distinguish and promote themselves as best in class. So in New York City, where I'm based, about a third of the office square footage, commercial real estate square footage, has a WiredScore rating. So we have WiredScore Platinum, Gold, Silver, and Certified. And the users of real estate and the intermediaries, brokers and tenants, can use the WiredScore certification to identify the buildings that are offering great connectivity and use that to prioritize their search and make sure they're renting or leasing the best space possible. I'm sure I'll get further into the weeds, but just one quick note on scale is we're working in about 20 countries with 800 different real estate companies with the goal of being a global standard for technology in buildings. The easiest analogy is LEED certification, but instead of focused on sustainability, we're focused on digital connectivity and smart tech.
Thanks, Ari. And finally, Kevin, can you just give a brief overview of Willow, please?
Sure, and thanks, Brad. And thanks to Cornell for having both Willow and me here today to speak with the group. So I've been with Willow since the beginning of the year. Prior to that, I led corporate development for Brookfield globally. And during my time at Brookfield, had the opportunity to meet Willow about 4 years ago, and ended up becoming a customer first. Willow creates digital twins for physical objects. Specifically, we do it for buildings in the commercial real estate world, office buildings, high-rise multifamily, airports, stadiums, et cetera, but also in the world of mining and rail, material equipment handling systems, rail systems, et cetera. So we create a digital integration platform or technology integration platform, otherwise known as a twin, which allows, number one, for there to be, in a minimal level, a place for different technology systems that are used to operate, to do financial accounting for, et cetera, for an asset, to be integrated. And it also allows for all that data to be aggregated at scale. And in a full fidelity example, in the situation where I was most involved over the last several years, Brookfield hired Willow to create an exact digital replica of a 2 million square foot office building that they developed in Manhattan. And so roughly 45,000 data points were replicated in digital form so that the building can be observed on a single screen, but also can have all of the different technology systems associated with the operation and asset management of the asset be located in a single point.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm sure we're going to need to break that down so that we can understand the specifics of what that means. But it's I think collectively a great overview of how all three of these companies are truly pioneering the digitization of real estate. And I want to sort of start because we do have a lot of students watching today. So I think there's a lot of interest in entrepreneurship. And I think the path to starting the companies that you guys have either founded or now work for is unique in the sense that I think it's a reflection of the optionality of entrepreneurship and PropTech and real estate. And that is the importance in some instances of taking a more traditional route in the sense of starting your careers in traditional real estate, building the credibility, the network, the experience, to understand the nuances of what makes the industry tick, and then using that context to then innovate. So Lucas and Kevin in particular, I'd love for you to share your backgrounds in sort of traditional real estate and how that led you to uncovering unique opportunities to innovate the industry and how you ultimately started your companies and or decided to leave and join a startup. Lucas, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, Brad, is to say, I think coming out of college, I had the idea that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. This was 25 years ago, and then realized I really didn't understand real estate, and so spent the next 25 years actually learning the business so I could become an entrepreneur. And before starting SmartRent, I was on the operations side. I was at a large publicly traded REIT of single family homes. I was the chief technology officer. And really for 3 years, I tried to get someone else to start SmartRent. Every vendor who would come in, I'd tell them, you should be doing this. You should be doing this. This is a great opportunity. And finally, after 3 years, I was like, well, I guess this is a sign that I need to go do this. But when I went and left to do it, there were two key things in place. One is I truly understood my customer because I was my customer. So inside out, backwards, forwards, budgeting process, where it goes on the P&L, how fund structures work, roll-ups, roll-downs, promotes, that completely understood where I was selling into. And I built a huge network. So my former CTO community and former CEO and COO community were friends who I now was calling on. And so it's sort of that inside track to say, I'm not cold calling. I'm not the smartest kid coming out of Cornell or coming out of Stanford. That actually, hey, I know this guy. He has credibility. He's walked in my shoes. That got us the inside track to get the first deals that we got done. And we weren't the biggest company out there doing these RFPs. We were a brand new company. We were a startup. We were winning RFPs solely based on credibility and the fact that people say, okay, well, look, I know this guy can deliver and I know he knows my business. And I can't really overstate the importance of that, of getting this off the ground. It's why we were the seventh company to come into the space, but the only one to scale and the only one to actually get units deployed. And so I think it doesn't have to be 25 years. I think, a lot of the audience on this panel are much smarter than me, and they can, but I would say, spend some time. If you're interested in a business, you're interested in real estate, go work in real estate, go do development, go work in multifamily, and it's going to pay dividends to your future endeavors.
Great. And I think it should be known that you're actually an alumnus of Cornell, but a different one, right, Lucas?
Yes, Cornell College, the liberal arts school in Mount Vernon, Iowa. So not the esteemed Big Red institution in Ithaca, but
thanks, Lucas. Really, really helpful insight. And Kevin, I think you are the epitome of what I'd sort of define as an entrepreneur, in the sense that your storied career at CBRE and Brookfield, I got to know you through your interests, both personally and professionally, in this growing PropTech ecosystem, and really taking a leadership role at Brookfield, both, I think, initially informally and then over time formally, to start to leverage the PropTech innovation. Can you explain sort of that entrepreneur approach and how it eventually led you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, man, that's a great point. It's interesting. During COVID, my kids are in their 20s, and my son, who is an entrepreneur right out of the block, looked at me and said, early on, he goes, Dad, you're an entrepreneur. And the reason we were talking about is I'd spent most of my career at CBRE, started in brokerage, but really leaned into tenant rep before it was a thing when Roger Staubach was just beginning to focus on representing tenants instead of landlords. And so for a good 25 years, I really spent my time learning the fundamentals of how to create value in real estate, underwriting transactions from an owner's perspective, from an occupier's perspective. And then I had the opportunity to shift to the development world about 10 years ago and go to work for a close friend, Rick Clark, was the CEO of Brookfield Properties. And there again, there was an opportunity in the corporate development role that I had, knowing the fundamentals of real estate value creation, but to be able to hope to identify new emerging ways of creating value in the real estate industry. And some of it first focused on flexible workspace, co-working, and we made some venture level investments in companies like Industrious and Convene. We looked at WeWork and took a pass. But it was then that Rick and some others started to focus on the fact that incredible amounts of data and information are passed through these assets that companies like Brookfield own all over the world. And Rick said, Kevin, we got to start capturing the data more effectively so that we can make smarter decisions. We can play Moneyball. And so that began an adventure, I'll call it, where Brookfield, along with a number of other firms, and I actually cold called Brad when I was in Los Angeles one time, because I heard about Fifth Wall. They had not approached Brookfield as one of their initial anchor investments, and I was curious to find out why. And that began a close friendship, and we've explored not only different companies but different categories of emerging technology in an effort to identify those technologies that, number one, improve the effectiveness of how people perform traditional jobs, whether that's leasing, accounting, capital projects management, all of the things that one needs to do in order to be a terrific and successful real estate owner. But then as those platforms like VTS for leasing, Argus for valuation, Yardi for accounting can be integrated, massive amounts of data can be aggregated at scale, and science can be applied. And so Brookfield, like other large successful real estate owners and occupiers, succeed because they're incredibly good at repeating, the process of raising capital, deploying capital, and operating assets. And so deploying technology in new and innovative ways sometimes cuts across the grain. But the emergence of multiple developments in the technology arena, I'll say 5G, Internet of Things, the cloud, edge devices, all coming to pass at approximately the same time, have now created an environment where digital twins have been around for over 50 years. They were originally developed by NASA to create models of rocket engines so the prototypes could be designed without having to build each individual rocket engine. But with the advance of these other technology platforms that I just mentioned, the commercial availability, both at a global basis at scale, as well as in an affordable manner for existing buildings as well as new construction, is finally here. And the digital platform, the digital twin, allows for the integration of all these other emerging real estate technologies, so that we can aggregate the data at scale and operate these assets through a single pane of glass. To address the students in the room question, Brad, 15, 20 years ago, it was very forward thinking to create mixed use development projects that would have a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week ecosystem and economy. Today, deploying technology in the built world, digitizing the built world so that things can be operated more efficiently and effectively, as well as to aggregate data, is the emerging, forward-looking a phenomenon that we think is time's come.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really great point. And I think for anybody looking to enter this space today, I think entering with a broader spectrum of opportunity and a more innovative approach to a potential career path, marrying the physical and the digital, the incumbent ecosystem and the technology one, and finding ways to gain skill sets that accommodate both, I think put you in a really unique position to be highly desirable in navigating the future of our industry. Because I think the individuals that can sit on the fence between those two things and take advantage of the opportunity that both represent, I think are really going to be best positioned to start the companies of the future, but also lead the old world companies into the future. So there's a lot of, I think, interesting opportunity that just didn't exist before, and makes our industry that much more compelling to enter, in my opinion, because we're going to watch it evolve in real time over the next 10 to 20 years. So what an exciting time to be focused on the space. Kevin, you started to allude to the redefinition or reconstitution of real estate towards being more digital. All right, I'd like for you to start to adjust and try to contextualize, like, what is this digital future? What is a smart building? I know there's a lot of definitions, but you're trying to actually define this as part of your company's sort of value proposition. I want you to walk through what you think a smart building is, why we should care, and what is this digital opportunity in real estate that Kevin started to allude to? Yeah,
happy to. So for context, we launched WiredScore as a certification platform, as I mentioned, focused on connectivity in buildings. Think about your internet, your Wi-Fi, your cellular. In April of this year, we launched a smart building certification called SmartScore. And that took about 12 to 14 months to develop, and we gathered 90 different companies together in an advisory council, landlords, tenants, engineers, consultants, brokers, all to kind of address, like, why do we need smart buildings, and to try to define a smart building. The term gets tossed around left and right, and no one is really saying it the same or thinking about it the same. And as a certification business, we thought, like, look, we can set the North Star here. We can define the term for the industry. I think really quickly, the trends driving the need for smart buildings and smart technology are threefold, and probably increasing in importance from 1 to 3. One is that we use tech in our everyday life, and so that's driving demand for more data and better services wherever we're spending time in space, in our apartment buildings, in our office buildings. Like those worlds are bleeding together, and the tech we use in one type of asset class, one type of space, we expect to be available in the next type of space that we go to, leaving home, going to the office, going from the office back home, interacting in retail spaces, everywhere we go. Second is changing working habits. Like, we know that modern working habits are collaborative and driven by technology. And like everyone in the world, 99% of people need technology to do their jobs, or wouldn't be able to do it with the same level of ease. But I think the third thing and the most important thing about the need for smart buildings and smart technology is the world's biggest problems in 2021 can be solved or addressed in part by in-building technology and smart building tech. The obvious one is the climate crisis, and the fact that our buildings contribute 40% to carbon emissions globally, but not just the climate crisis. You know, looking after our health and wellness in a pandemic or post-pandemic world, cybersecurity and physical security, like all of these challenges of our time are impacted by and potentially solved by smart tech, which is super exciting. So for those of you looking to enter the space or working in the space, like, it's not just about making buildings better, it's about solving really big problems. In terms of the smart building definition, to your other question, Brad, we came up with a one sentence definition, which I'll explain. And this might sound kind of not super revolutionary, but it was really hard to get industry buy-in on this. I don't wish it on anyone else as a challenge, but our definition was a smart building delivers outstanding outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed evolving expectations. And I'll quickly pick that apart because the words have meaning. When we say a smart building delivers outstanding outcomes, we're talking about the outcomes, like what a building actually delivers to its users. What does it enable people to do? How does it reduce friction? How does it create better experience or resolve challenges? It's not about the technology itself, it's about what it's doing. We say it needs to do that for all users. So it's not just about tenants, it's about all stakeholders, property managers, asset managers, investors, visitors, broader community. What goes into a building impacts all of those people. Through digital technology is an important part, because there's certain functionalities that we can deliver without tech. We could have somebody standing in a building doorway counting, on a clipboard, people entering the building to get a sense of occupancy. But without technology solutions, that's not going to scale. It's not going to integrate the data with other parts or systems of the building. And then we say it needs to do this to meet evolving expectations, which is another way of saying stakeholder needs are going to change, and the tech in the building needs to evolve with it through software upgrades, interoperability with other systems. This isn't a one-time kind of solution to our problems. It needs to continue. The technology we deploy needs to solve our problems now and in the future. And so that kind of simple sentence is how we think about smart. And we've developed our rating system, our SmartScore certification, around that definition, really focused on the outcomes of what the building delivers. How is it helping humans to accomplish what they need to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super smart in the sense that I think with a lack of definition comes a lack of strategy and a lack of bottom line impact, in the sense that I think without the industry coming together to define like what this is, what it should be, and what customers care about, and looking to address those needs, everybody's going to be going down separate paths. And I think sub-optimizing, what to your point, is like a really important building level, community level, tenant level outcome that can improve the way we live, work, and engage with our environment. So it's a big goal and a big task in front of you, but kudos to you and your organization for being on the cutting edge of looking to solve it. So, Lucas, I want to come back to you, because I think when it comes to that broad vision, you guys are actually executing on something very specific in the sense of delivering sort of smart solutions to multifamily and single family homes and single family rentals. I'd love for you to kind of give sort of context to Ari's conversation and sort of provide real world examples in terms of what smart solutions are you offering the market? How is the market receiving those? And Ari briefly mentioned the pandemic. How has the pandemic changed that engagement in terms of reinforcing the value proposition and or opening up new opportunity for you?
Yeah, let me start with the last question first. I mean, the pandemic, we'll look back, will be one of the most incredible catalysts for digital transformation I think we've ever seen, not just in real estate, but globally. And we're certainly feeling that in real estate. Whereas sort of pre-pandemic, we felt like owners of real estate knew they should be making digital transformation and digital changes. But it was sort of, there's a lot going on and occupancy was high and rent was growing and it was easy to staff. And with this pandemic, it's been a complete sea change where owners are embracing it like I've never seen, where it's become an inbound instead of an outbound kind of a pitch. Where how soon can we get to this? And I think we're all going to benefit from that. It's a great time to be going into and looking at PropTech. That owners are open to it, and it's sort of like once you start opening yourself up for change, you're willing to open yourself up more. So sort of that crack in the iceberg has formed. And so, but let me double click on the first part of your question with sort of some specifics around. I think Ari did a great job framing the macro and just give you some color of what that means in the micro and why as real estate operators do we care about this. And so, the founding thesis of SmartRent was to really create a hardware agnostic open platform with the idea that you could have many different devices, many different sensors, some for the consumer, like it's great to get Postmates in the front door, and some for the owners, like it's great to monitor your building for leaks and protect against water damage. That all of these things were related. And before SmartRent, they were all separate vendors. So you had a leak sensor vendor, you had a door lock vendor, you had a thermostat vendor. And that's the idea that we thought was crazy, that that's too many different integration points, too many different touch points. And it takes the smart devices and makes them dumb. To have 60,000 logins to your thermostats for your properties is not a smart implementation. And so what we try to do is take all these different hardware devices, all these different manufacturers, bring them into one centralized platform, and then actually know what to do with that data and make it actionable. And I think that was the missing piece, is to say, when a leak sensor goes off, if you run real estate, what needs to happen is I need to get an emergency work order in the system. I've got a system that handles this. I know how to robocall a plumber. I know how to take care of this. But if there isn't the platform to make those two meet in the middle, it's going to be worthless. And so that is one of our biggest use cases, by the way. It's not theoretical. Water does 70% of the damage to multifamily structures in the world. 70% of the damage is caused by water. Mitigating against water damage is huge, not only for the balance sheet and for the P&L, but also on the environmental side, and saying if you take out 10 floors in a Manhattan building, that's 10 floors that go to a landfill. That's new materials that have to be put into to rebuild this and that. So there's a huge environmental aspect to this as well of protecting these buildings. And Ari mentioned it as well, but utility consumption. So having a motion sensor in your gym, and if the motion sensor doesn't see any motion, turning the air conditioning off and not cooling an empty space, good for the bottom line. You're not paying that utility bill. Also, more importantly, good for the environment. And so I think and the next wave of this, so that was sort of the first wave, was access control and some light sensors. We're just toeing the water where this is going. And I think what's exciting, where we're seeing the puck kind of move, is into air quality sensors, environmental sensors, better understanding what you're breathing, better monitoring. We're actually deploying for one owner a new sensor that can tell the difference between smoke from grilling your meat inside as from marijuana and tobacco, and actually monitoring and enforcing those things. So there's a really interesting shift going on that we're just at the front end of, and it's going to be exciting to see where it goes, to really create that connected community, that integrated living. But our pitch has always been, it's great for the resident, it's great for the person living there, but it also has to be great for the owner. And that's a real key differentiator. A lot of products we see that come to market, it's about your resident wants this, your resident wants this, your resident wants this. One of our niches, and again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier of coming from real estate, was that's great, but I'm also motivated by my expense side. And so being able to show, hey, you'll actually do this even if your resident didn't want it, because there's value, there's ROI in it there. That I think is vital.
Yeah, and Lucas, can you just address? We have an audience question that I'd like you to kind of contextualize. So, someone just interested around sort of do your platforms require portfolio-wide adoption? Like, is this sort of an all or nothing thing? It's either you use SmartRent's operating platform as a single source of truth, or you don't get the full benefit. Like, is there a plug-and-play aspect of this? Are all these vendors working in concert? How should one think about sort of scaling across a broader portfolio and how to leverage your platforms effectively?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not a requirement to go portfolio wide, but what's interesting is as owners see the benefits themselves, they actually start pushing us to go portfolio wide. Because if you go to any real estate operator and say, I'm going to take your income up, your residents are going to pay you more rent, you're going to increase your income. Oh, and by the way, I'm also going to take your expenses down because you're not going to be paying the same utilities. You're not going to be dealing with water damage. There's not a single unit, building, roof in the world where the owner doesn't want to increase their revenue and decrease their expense. And so it sort of naturally becomes a portfolio deployment because of the benefits of the platform. But for those of you getting ready to start a career and be an entrepreneurial in real estate, there's something you're going to have to wrap your head around, which is every owner in the world, even owners who invested in our platform, are going to start with a pilot. So we're all skeptical. Real estate owners are skeptical by nature, and we say, I've heard all these benefits. I've had 25 pitches of how this is going to change my business. And if I own 100 apartment communities around the country, the natural thing to do is say, well, let's try it at 1, or let's try it at 2, and let's really see the benefits. And so if you're a student in the audience, you're thinking about being an entrepreneur in this, I would say embrace the pilot. I see a lot of companies where they say, this has to go portfolio wide. We got to deploy this. And it's just not a pitch that's going to be successful. And so I think it's actually better to lead with it and say, let's do a pilot. You come up with the idea as the salesperson. Let's pilot this. Why don't you see the benefits for yourself? And then once you're comfortable, we can talk about how we deploy it.
Great. Yeah, listen, I think you bring up another important point that, Kevin, I'd like you to address, because I think all of us could sit here and talk about the challenges of selling into the real estate industry. And Kevin, you were sort of behind the curtain there for quite some time. And I think working incognito, trying to convince large incumbents to change their way of thinking and kind of approach things the way that Lucas has really outlined. So how do you see the challenge? How do you see the challenges of selling into an industry that's, unfortunately been significantly under invested in technology for far too long? How do you see that evolving even as early as the last few years, and where do you see it going? And how does someone who wants to get in this space overcome those challenges? How would you help them navigate it, Kevin?
Yeah, Brent, no, it's a really important point. So firsthand experience with Brookfield, but then more broadly as well. The approach Willow has taken is to address the fact that over the last 10 to 15 years, the shift from tangible deliverables during the design and construction process of major assets has moved from plans being on paper to being digital, to equipment specifications and maintenance logs and schedules moving from paper logbooks or playbooks to digital information. And so there's been an exponential increase each year. And so the design construction development professionals in organizations like Brookfield's have been looking for a solution where they can capture all of the information that's generated during the 4, 5, 6 year development process, and capture it in a way that can then be turned over to the asset management and operations members of the organization to continue, to have the legacy information from the building or the asset, but also to use it as a tool with which to operate the asset going forward. The reality is 99% of the real estate in the world is already built. And so there needs to be this full fidelity opportunity for development, like I mentioned before, the 45,000 plus data points, but also from an existing building standpoint. I like to think instead of a pilot, Lucas, is a phase 1. All right, so we start with what is effectively a pilot, but going in and delivering a digital integration platform, a digital twin for an existing asset that's simple and relatively inexpensive and focuses on things like occupancy energy consumption and sustainability and cybersecurity, which are, among the most important, elements that owners and occupiers are currently considering today. Willow's approach has been to focus on open system plug and play offerings, so that we recognize the fact that every single asset is different than another one. People refer to them as snowflakes. And so even if a BMS's building management system is created by the same manufacturer, there are different versions of it. There are different, models of it as it evolves over time. And so working very closely with Microsoft, and it's similar to the HTML, which works on the internet, but we've developed a digital twin definition language, the DTDL, that allows for technology companies to conform to the open source code, so that they can then integrate on our digital twin and allow for the owner and the occupier to integrate the technology. The North Star for us is twofold. Number one, for owners, it's to create a situation where the information and the operating use of the technology platform aggregates data, so that ultimately the building is worth more with a digital twin than without. And we've picked 19% just so that it's something tangible, but ideally a building with a digital twin, or ultimately a building with a digital twin, will be worth up to 19% more than one without, because of the simplicity in operating the multiple technology platforms through a single pane of glass, but also, most importantly, being able to apply science to all of the aggregated data. The corollary to that is occupiers of space, tenants that both own and lease space, have developed incredibly sophisticated technology infrastructure for their workplace. And ultimately, it's intended to drive productivity, whether the environment is more hospitable for people to work in, oxygen, lighting, et cetera, but also tools like Microsoft 365 that measure productivity of people. You're spending your time with emails, who are the people you're interacting most with. But ultimately, occupiers want to be able to confirm and calculate that a workplace environment allows for more revenue to be generated per employee in one environment than another. So ultimately, a workplace environment in a building with a digital twin will allow for employees to generate up to 19% more revenue per person than one without it. And so it's a mutually reinforcing phenomena, where the occupier and the owner of these assets, sometimes one and the same. Microsoft, for example, in addition to being a great technology partner, also employs tens of thousands of people around the world. And so the ability and opportunity for owners and occupiers now to work together through these digital platforms is a new phenomena that going forward allows for greater value creation, greater productivity, and and for these assets to be part of the greater grid system.
Yeah, and Kevin, real quickly, how do you reconcile you and Lucas both mentioned sort of the importance of open architecture? How do you reconcile that concept with real estate owner operators who historically have been wildly competitive and very insular in their approaches in terms of any IPs internal, and opening up your buildings or your acquisition strategy or anything up to anything outside is considered taboo? How do you move the industry forward, and what are those conversations like?
So I'll say the most forward-thinking members of the industry recognize that there will continue to be fierce competition for acquisition and ownership of assets for capital, but that the pace of change is so rapid and the value in collaboration is so significant that finding ways to deploy technology in ways that serve the occupants, serve the industry. There's more benefit in this collaboration than there is in trying to develop solutions individually, by organization, by asset. And so scale and the ability to drive reduction in costs across large portfolios across multiple portfolios is where the efficiencies are actually realized. So it's frankly, Brad, it's a function of change management. The members of the organizations who tend to be more readily willing to adopt technology, for example, are ones who grew up with mobile devices, like our phones, and default to them. Played video games when they were kids. So building, chief engineers, building operations managers, accountants, for these large owners who are intimately familiar with technology and rely on it in the rest of their lives, are quick to adopt it in the workplace as well. And so it's a phenomenon. It's a time when collaboration and cooperation will drive more results, and those who achieve, I think, the best results are going to distance themselves from those who are slower to adopt.
Gotcha. Great. Thanks, Kevin.
Can I just underscore one thing that Kevin and Lucas, I think, both explained really well? But when you're selling into real estate, the clarity of your ROI, like delivery, is everything. It's telling your clients, multifamily or office, how they're going to experience ROI, going through that pilot or phase one process, and then showing them exactly the results of what you told them before. And I remember when Kevin was at Brookfield, we had this exact conversation several years ago when I was telling him about WiredScore, and he's like, "Are you going to save me money? Are you going to make me money, and how?" And it's a pretty simple conversation, but a hard thing to do. And in a world where PropTech is now a lot more mature than it was a couple of years ago, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of PropTech solutions out there. I think the winners all have that ROI narrative down, and it's compelling and clear, and they can prove it effectively, and that kind of separates the winners from the rest of the pack.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I want to steer the conversation to addressing two I'd say sort of verticals of interest, and the first one being geographical. So Aria, I want you to address the geographic opportunity outside of the U.S. Obviously all of your companies are actually selling globally. So I want to understand how the world views this opportunity, the challenges and opportunities of expanding outside of our borders. The other one is really around asset classes, which we'll address really quickly. Alex asked an insightful question around technologies that are affecting asset classes beyond traditional commercial and residential. Lucas, I think you and I know this better than most, right? Technology helped, essentially institutionalize an entirely new industry over the past, 12, 15 years in sort of institutional single family rental, which is where you're selling significant amount of product and capability. But that industry was born out of technology first and foremost. The ability to acquire hundreds of thousands of single family homes, diligence, underwrite, purchase, rehab, market and lease, and then ultimately maintain and property manage. All of that was enabled by technology in the sense of being able to achieve the same margins of a vertically stacked multifamily building, even when you lay it on its side and spread it across a large geographic region. The technology servicing that industry and others like it, single family rental, short-term leisure, short-term rentals, iBuying, second home markets, all these things these are industries that are growing up and institutionalizing, a lot of it off the backs of the Airbnb marketplace that's creating an incredible supply and demand opportunity for institutionalizing the real estate angle of consumer demand. I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody listening that technology is going to allow almost every industry category that exists today and a lot of net new ones to flourish and thrive and capture increased customer demand for occupying and accessing real estate in new and interesting ways. So there isn't a better time to think about how technology can affect different industry verticals. I think, Lucas and I are living proof of that. And I think what Kevin's doing in sort of the digital twin, and that's going to likely be a whole new category of real estate, right? Is the digital value of real estate. And Ari, in terms of what is sort of the competitive advantages for articulating a smart building, a connected building, and being able to measure that across multiple industries and multiple geographies. So with that, Ari, I want to make sure that we address the geographic opportunity. Explain how WiredScore has taken advantage of opportunities outside the U.S. and how receptive is the rest of the world to opportunities like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we are, as I mentioned at the start, we started as a New York City only platform, and then expanded across the U.S. To the UK, and now are in 3 weeks we'll be in 20 countries with a full European launch. And Q1 will be our APAC launch, starting with Singapore. So we're getting a really good sense from the what I call the in-building tech perspective of where there's kind of global strengths and weaknesses. And we have a good view on that because we set a measuring stick through our certification platform. I think there's both differences to note, but also kind of massive global commonality at the same time. I think looking at certain technology areas, APAC is ahead of the curve from us here in North America on connectivity and making sure that they have the most advanced digital infrastructure to support reliable, high-quality connectivity in their spaces. Whereas in Europe and Australia, we see kind of leadership on sustainability, in particular around ESG reporting, and making sure that there are goals set around ESG and reporting that to all stakeholders. And they seem to be a little bit more sophisticated in pockets. The UK is the biggest adopter of our smart building certification, SmartScore, thus far, even though it's a much smaller market than some of the other places we're working. So we're seeing a lot of variation, which is kind of interesting, but I don't think it's so different to change what I think is a universal understanding that there are pillars of what makes a building kind of achieve its objectives, do what it's supposed to. And that's around experience, sustainability, wellness. And in 2021 and beyond, there's a technology layer that needs to cut across it as an enabler. And so everyone at the moment is trying to figure out how to have a holistic strategy to use technology. I think asset class independent, I think this is true in all asset classes, to use technology to better deliver those outcomes around experience and sustainability and health and wellness and community and productivity and so on and so forth. An example I like to use a lot is it's not good enough today to just have indoor air, like really good air filters to support indoor air quality. That has to be integrated with other systems to be able to tell your tenants about it and let them know when it's good and safe to come in, and when the building's really crowded and it's less good. It's that kind of use of technology that takes our buildings from what they are today to a place where there's continuous feedback loops and optimization that I think the entire real estate community globally is on the precipice of, and can work with companies like SmartRent and Willow to get there.
Great. Go ahead, Kevin.
Can I just offer an indication of where things are headed? So Willow's about 4 years old, based in Sydney. We have about 300 employees globally, and have digital twins deployed across assets in Europe, Australia, and North America. One of our significant, I'll say, milestone investments from outside an investor was earlier this year by an organization called InQtel, IQT for short. And in the 90s, the CIA established a venture capital fund to be able to, that would invest in emerging categories of technology that could be useful to the U.S. military and intelligence communities. And so IQT made an investment in Willow because it's identified Willow as an important technology category. The digital twin, for as we've been talking about, integration of different technology platforms, but also Willow is a leader in this space. And IQT has a presence in across the U.S., UK, and Australia, and working with IQT now, we're in discussions with the intelligence communities such as the CIA, the FBI, National Security Agency, et cetera, NSA. And so it's an indication of where things are headed. If you look at automobiles that were manufactured in the 60s, they were all mechanical, even the hot rods and the sports cars. Today, the most sophisticated cars are single integrated technology platforms. And so the ability to download updates as we do to our telephones and to electric cars, et cetera, will begin applying to buildings, to rail, to stadiums, et cetera, in the future. And so you talk about where is it going to happen first. Well, it's happening all over the world, and it's something that there is a leap of faith that needs to be taken. Ari's absolutely right. Return on investment is of paramount importance, but it's also the leaders in the different industries are the ones who are adopting first, and achieving those efficiencies, those returns on investment where they can, but also seeing where the functionality can continue to be improved and built upon over time, so that the relevance of these technology integrations, take on greater and greater importance.
Thanks, Kevin. So, in the sort of last couple of minutes of our discussion, Lucas, I wanted you to just kind of briefly address the fundraising side of business, because I think running a business is one thing, but raising capital is something entirely different. And you've had the distinct opportunity to sort of see that through from the entire life cycle of seed investment all the way through an IPO. Can you kind of explain sort of that journey? And then most importantly, how are the public markets viewing this digitization opportunity? How is pitching them on this? Because again, like selling into real estate is hard enough, but convincing, again, public market investors of all the things that we've mentioned on the phone, you're sort of a pioneer in that, both in SFR and now at SmartRent. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, let's start with the public markets, because I think it's really interesting that there's a thirst for, especially real estate investors, traditional real estate investors, to tap into some growth, and there's a thirst for yield right now. I think it's a function of macroeconomic decisions we've made that yield is at such a premium that really 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think we would have had this opportunity. It would have been too aggressive, and now people are really open to it. And once these investors in the public market hear the story and see it, and they understand just the size of the market, the addressable market of real estate is so massive that you get a really great reputation, or you get good feedback from people saying, well, geez, you don't really have to have a huge piece of the pie to have a really meaningful business. And so I think it's a great category to be innovating in because of the addressable market. And again, it's not just, as Ari and Kevin were alluding to, it's not just the domestic market, it's a global market, and the global real estate market is the largest market out there. So I think it's a great market to be in, and it's great to be public. We need more PropTech companies to come public. We need more peers. We need more of us out there. But I think it's been great. And in terms of fundraising, I think, going back to even starting the company, we self-funded this. And I think if you can't self-fund it, you might want to think about not being an entrepreneur yet. I think that's a really important milestone. And it actually, when we went to raise seed money and went to raise our A, it gave us a lot of credibility to say, well, you've already got real dollars in. You're not just taking my money and going to go, start flying private. You've got money and you've got a track record. But it is very, very, very different than running a business and out being a salesperson and raising money. You really have to have the sort of the two hats on and have to be able to pivot away from building the business, running the business, and say, now I'm promoting the business and I'm talking about the vision. And at every step of the way, what we did, our strategy at SmartRent, was to prioritize strategic money over just venture capital money, and to say, at least I'm talking to someone like a fifth wall who understands my business. And I learned that the hard way by going to these traditional venture capital firms who are inbound coming into us. I was excited. They're big names that we've all heard of, and they know nothing about real estate though. And so, even going back to what the public markets love is the addressable market. I had several top firm VCs say, we're not sure this is a big enough market opportunity. And I'm like, I've done a terrible job explaining this, because there literally isn't a bigger market opportunity. And so have a thick skin if you're out raising money, and prioritize strategic money over just money would be how I would look at that.
Yeah, TAM, which is total addressable market, is a big VC term, and it's always a part of any investment decision and discussion. Our ICs are like, we still include it, but we're working in the largest industry, and our TAM is usually not an issue when considering risk. This is a massive market opportunity. Real estate and real estate capital markets are the largest on earth. So these markets are ginormous. So thanks, Lucas. I mean, and congratulations on going public. You've been of all the SPACs, I think, performing better than most. So it's been fun to see your guys' success.
Thanks, and thanks for your help. And I will say it's a lot of work to be public, and it's a lot of work to tell the story, but it's definitely worthwhile. So I would encourage everyone to go for it if they can.
Yeah, and again, I think it's an important point you made, right? Because I think everybody is looking at SPACs as an interesting alternative to traditional IPOs, and I think both have their risks and opportunities associated with it. But I think what I think the main takeaway from the SPAC craze that we've just gone through is, I think for an entrepreneur in particular, and for anybody here who's thinking about doing the same, there is a reason why bankers exist, right? We can knock them all we want, but they spend months preparing you to be a public company executive, and that is a skill set that is much different than being a private company CEO. So there is an evolution of skill and capability that's required, and you've handled it brilliantly. But I think that's lost on people. I think a lot of people assume IPO exit, and they're like, oh, like this is what I worked so hard for, not realizing that, man, being a public company executive isn't a walk in the park.
That's right. I was saying internally as we were going through the process and getting ready, it's a race to the starting line, and you really have to think about that. It's a milestone. It's a great milestone, but it literally is the beginning of the journey. So.
And Brad, if I might add, just to jump on Lucas's coattails here, strategic investors it's critically important. And you asked before about collaboration across the industry. What we found at Brookfield was that the organizations that were beginning to make venture level investments in real estate technology platforms were doing it together and creating, coalitions where, the strategic investment in the platform, along with the advice and deployment across portfolios, was what made a difference in, the not only the success, but the ability for these companies to thrive, the technology companies themselves, but also the investors / customers that resulted. We were very fortunate just completing about 2 weeks ago an $80 million interim financing and capital raise, and we're shifting from the original investors, primarily in Sydney, now to a real strategic cohort, like I mentioned, IQT before, and others who are looking to, both with their capital, with their portfolios, and their experience, help to drive the growth and success of these companies.
Great. Well, listen, I think we're coming up on time. So before we close things out, I just wanted to go around the horn one last time. And if you guys could just offer, sort of some parting advice for any students listening in terms of, things that you wish someone would have told you, or any sort of lessons learned that you kind of hold, take with you. Really, a couple sentences worth, I think we'll do it, and then we'll wrap things up. But appreciate everybody's participation. Super fascinating conversation. I think we're in the first innings of this thing, and you guys are leading the way. So thrilled and honored to be a part of this conversation. So Lucas, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I got one sentence, and I actually have it still in my office. I look at it every day. It's tough times don't last, tough people do. So that's words I live by.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I can go next. I think just from the perspective of bringing on young people onto our team, I think what we really like is interest and passion for real estate. Doesn't have to be real estate experience, although we like it. But maybe most importantly, like, we want people who are kind of like futurists. Even if it's futurists sitting on the couch or in your dorm room, like we want people that have an opinion on where the world is going and how real estate is changing and why. That kind of interest and passion, I think, sets people up for success, makes you more curious, makes you ask the question why and how can we do things better. And that's the kind of folks we want at WiredScore. So I'd encourage everyone to adopt that mindset.
Kevin, close us out.
Yeah, so very quickly, we talked about it before, particularly early in your career, fundamental knowledge of the industry you're in, real estate being a terrific one. but also never forget about culture and relationships. It's having a mentor, working in an organization where you're as excited to go to the office or to wherever you work in the morning as you are going home to loved ones at night is a great yardstick with which to measure it. And if you're technically competent and you're working with great people, you'll have a successful life.
Great, Stephen. We'll pass it off to you.
Fabulous. Thanks everybody for all the insight. I love the clarity of how will you save me money? How will you make me money? I think everybody on the panel explained from their points of view how they'll do those things going forward. Again, I want to thank Goodwin Procter, Hudson Bay Company, and Paul Rabaka for their support of this session and our continuing sponsors. And to tell all the viewers that we'll have our next session on Thursday at 4 o'clock rather, sorry. And it's on global real estate institutional trends. And we have a great speaker set up for that as well. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks to the panel. Brad, thanks so much for doing a phenomenal job moderating everybody. So have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.